Good evening, everyone. So we decided to do this kind of informal roundtable talk to get more to get a better understanding and idea about your practices, how did you get into art, and to maybe better understand, what pushes you to do what you guys do, essentially. Yeah. So, ma'am, I think we should begin with you. How did you, get into art? What prompted you to pursue art as a career?
Well, to begin with, I had no aspiration to become an artist. I was actually wanting to become a surgeon. And then
Okay.
I got my admission in the medical college in Rajasthan. And then, in my excitement, I went to see an operation, and all the bloodshed kind of found it very gory. And that decided it that I didn't want to be a surgeon. And my parents were very sort of culturally oriented.
Okay.
So, if they could, they would have had us all kind of trained in 64 colors. But we were trained to sing, dance, and drawing and painting was something which the whole family did. And then, of course, sports and theater and everything. So, I think given those times, one of the best option for female children was to go in for visual arts, and that's how I landed up at MS University.
Okay. For you, it might have been very different because you have like really strong parents and like artistic figures who've shaped the landscape of Indian art. Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot, but
I tried very hard to get away from it. I thought of doing different things. I was learning music as a child. I wanted to do psychology. But one thing during those times, what my parents did was they would take us everywhere. Okay. And so I attended all the camps, they called it at that time, with them, and which would be long. I mean, like sometimes 6 weeks, 2 months. And what I felt was that these adults are having so much fun. And whatever I would do, I think I want to do something like them, although the art scene has changed now. And I think we are at a different place, but the priorities were very, very different. There was no art market at that time. And why people made what they made had completely a different concern and preoccupation. And we have moved from there. But I think probably just being in the world of that kind of tactile making, whether it's painting, drawing. I actually started in Baroda with sculpture, but I missed the smell of oil paint, turpentine, which I was familiar with at home. So I dropped a year and moved to painting. And so I don't know. I think it was all a decision made in some kind of. I didn't think hard about it, but once I'm in it, once I was in it, it became a proper challenge to see how it is. A challenge was to find a voice of one's own, I think.
okay. What was it for you like?
So I think for me it was a series of flukes, and it was essentially kind of like a fluke that my mother grew up in Baroda.
Okay.
And it was a fluke that I happened to see a Delhi College of Art brochure in one of the handovers of books and things from one of my second cousins. She was moving to US, and somehow one suitcase of books came to our house, and there was a DCA brochure, and I looked at it. I was in my 10th class at that time. I was like, oh, so there's something in which all through your life, what you have to do is you have to paint. So I want to do that. I don't want to do anything else.
Yeah.
And then the other fluke was that I cleared the entrance test of Baroda in the second attempt.
Oh, wow.
Otherwise, I would have gone to study either commerce or home science or something
Okay.
like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, it was a series of flukes, and somehow like I got, and another fluke that I cleared the test, but there was some printing error in the list.
Yeah.
And then a month and a half down, at that time, Dean, Professor Dhumal, he
Okay.
came to my local guardian's place and said that you got great marks. You should have fought for your seat because
Yes.
there was an error and there was an error, and I'm here to apologize and please come and join tomorrow onwards.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a series of flukes, but I did know that I wanted to do something that was not. I mean, I didn't know this entire world of art like that, but I had a very solid and rich upbringing with crafts, and we traveled a lot with my father's job.
Okay. What did you do?
He was in the army, and every 3 years we used to be in really far-flung places of the country.
Okay.
And my mother had a lot of interest in cultures of different places. So we grew up learning weaving in Arunachal and seeing stone carving in Bikaner and looking at Godri makers in Bikaner and things like that. So yeah, so that
really
was
puts a perspective to
yeah,
kind of a,
yeah, and that I think came to my resort in a way, support system more than the painting and sculpture training in Baroda. But of course, it's all together. It's not like
yes.
yeah, yes.
Why did you switch from painting to sculpture?
Yeah, so I think
bachelor's students.
the visual space of painting was something that I couldn't enter easily at that time. The visual space that is in the bounds of and the rules related to that, and the need to challenge those rules. All of that entire language was a little too difficult for me during the undergrad, which I think sculpture training provides you access through material. The fact that a material and its being produces an image, and then you have to do something with it. So, yeah, so yes, so I had like pottery for my like an optional subject in undergrad, and that really got me involved with sculptural practice. I wanted to leave painting and get into pottery. Yeah, yeah, taking too much time.
No. It's just very interesting because the way in which, especially the two of y'all, kind of move between these two.
Well, I also started with ceramics because after my 10th board, there was this 4 months vacation, and my parents thought, what will she do sitting at home? And it was possible to, I don't know, it was a fluke again, to be able to get admission in Gallerie, Artist Village. Not admission, I think they just took me on, very nice of them. And Mr. Bhushan said, if you get center in a week's time, then maybe you can proceed to work for 4 months. And it was being in company of Daroz, Gauri Khosla, Nirmala Patwardhan, and I suddenly felt so grown up. I was still in 10th, so grown up to do a day-long work making, and it was very special. So I think little introduction to certain practices, which opens out a different sense of space, because I think at home I could understand 2 dimension because painting, drawing was, but I think I began to get a sense of the third in that making, and I think all that's comes back to me later in my life. I didn't understand it then, but I think it now, I think the current practice is of, I mean, engages with objects and object making.
But Kushala, before we move on to you, I have a question for you. How did the transition to textile happen for you? Because that's like a very, very different space altogether, and you kind of I've seen work where you kind of moved on to those kind of combinations, so
Actually,
to say.
textiles was really by accident.
Okay.
I was doing my advanced printmaking at Royal College of Art.
Okay.
The studio was actually housed within the V&A complex.
Okay.
And every time one wanted to kind of stretch one's legs, we just entered the gallery.
Okay.
And that's where I actually got hooked on to textiles and I did
Okay.
a kind of a self-study.
Okay.
And that was very interesting because also it got me to see as to, how civilizations are actually represented.
Okay.
So that, there was a certain kind of understanding of one's identity and how it was projected,
Okay.
to the other.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So, how did you get into art, Kushala?
So I lived in a very small place, Panchgani, which was 10-hour drive from Mumbai when I was younger. But we used to have people that came and lived with us every weekend. And what I would do is go to my room and like make a card for them, like welcome card. And I would give it to them as like something because it was so exciting to have someone come to our house.
Yes.
And when I would give the card, they would just be so happy and surprised. And I was like, wow, this is such a cool thing you can give when people get happiness. And also, I think like that continued, and I would play in the mud. And I felt like when I would visit cities, I would be like, where's the mud? Where did the mud go? I want to play with the mud. So that continued too. And then I think my parents also helped a lot. I think in the middle, I was like, oh, I'll be a dentist, I'll be a lawyer. I'll do something else. And then my dad said something which at that time surprised me. He was like, don't let anyone tell you being an artist is not a legitimate profession. And that really like resonated with me. And at that time I said, no one told me to be a lawyer. And then he took me to a lawyer's office and I saw all the books and I said, it's okay, I will be an artist. And I continued and I loved it because you could be quiet with it, you could interact with other people with it. There's so many other ways to do art. And to understand the world through art. I think that really resonated with me. And also like moving, I would only paint in the beginning because that's what I knew how to do. And I think eventually there was a time when I was just like, I just want this to come out of the paper. Yeah.
Who's your favorite artist?
Oh my God. So many. You can't, come back to me.
Okay.
For you, what was it like?
I think it's been. I think there's been many artists who shaped me, and I think even by practicing art, I think one of the things you realize is that you can't be narrow about this definition of an artist. So I think it's really like phenomenal how we learn things, Some by seeing in big museums and galleries, but so much of our learning and perception of the world and the shaping of the world, storytelling that we do is based in our immediacy of surroundings, our upbringing in families, and the kind of what today's world calls exposure, but essentially our being in our world, how your parents look at the world, what do they give you as ethics of looking, So I think some of these things are really pivotal in shaping our practices. And for me, I think a lot of travel and seeing different kinds of, craft practices and then reading about them and various artists who have traversed those areas, created certain pathways for us, all of these journeys, from a very commercial venture of a cobbler in Hyderabad Central University to decorators who make flower sets for marriages, just many people, rich people, and really making do with things, making do with resources that are available, and through that generating creative output. So I think there's a lot of things to think through then, You don't feel lonely then, in that sense.
That sense,
Yes.
in your work, you often refer to some writings as well, some poems, some stories or tales. So, who are the like most inspiring writers or poets or like
Yeah, so
these
to
kind?
add on, or rather to kind of build on to what he's asking, because that's the other thing that, one realizes looking at a lot of your practices, and also while engaging with you, understanding, what shaped, as you said, what shapes the being. Like for instance, I was speaking to somebody very recently, and they said that, and they, they said that they're very, very kind of moved by John Cage, the composer. And then you kind of slowly start realizing how that kind of starts shaping their practice. So something like that, if you would share, which kind of, really pushes your work, or which really work in the sense, the thought process of the work.
There are a lot of people. I think like poets, if you think of poets, there's like Mary Oliver, Adrian Rich, there's in India Jayant Mahapatra's work. So many poets actually, even lovely poems of Ranjit Haskote, he's also a very good poet. So I think like it's like, it's something, there's a rich heritage coming from different sources in that sense. But also, there's also, in some ways, you have to grasp it and process it, you know. And somewhere, by the time you are touching your 40s, you realize you also have to be focused about what you read, you know. So some of these choices then get shaped in that sense towards what you want to do and how much can you work with questions of depth and surface, all of that, you know.
That's always a question, because there's so much. I mean, it's something that we've been grappling with of late. Where do you draw the line, in terms of the scope of work, in terms of, how much do you want to kind of get into it further to the point that you don't go down the rabbit hole completely and go cuckoo at some particular point of time. Do you guys encounter that in terms of maybe your process on a day-to-day basis, like maybe overcoming creative blocks? Does that happen?
Yeah, yeah. There are always good days and bad days, and I think bad days are also very trying, and one is not productive enough. There are moments where I think the resolve is not in the head and not coming through the process of making also. But I think it's all a journey, and then even the bad days get added up to making you realize something as you're making. I think in my case, pleasure of making is what is very important, and that takes me through, even if it is. And I think my making is also very, distractions are also very important for me, because I could be reading something and my mind would be diverted to something else completely, and then it comes back and forth. So it's this whole thing of how you bring your mind back into it while it's running somewhere else. And so I think, whereas that other space is equally important, and this space. So there's like self and the other, which is constantly at play. I'm a very distracted person, but I kind of, it's a constant process of bringing the focus back in, and so
If I may
not a good example.
jump in, I usually think of it like think of it as walking in through a dark tunnel. Like there's always like dark tunnels of just darkness. You're in agony because you just don't know what is going on. You're trying to find something but you can't see, and then there'll be snippets of light and you're just like, okay, I see it. And then you're like walking towards it, and then you're still walking in the darkness to find something constantly. But then there's those moments of like pure like light, or you can just see things clearly, that just keep pushing the work and yourself forward. And I think like in terms of distractions too, like something very beautiful is that we can tie different things that are seemingly like not related together. So like really you can take like things that people don't think about, and you yourself don't feel like they're connected, and you can find that, oh, like actually they meet somewhere, and you can put together that kind of meeting. And when you do it so clearly, even for yourself or for the viewer to see it, that's like a really beautiful moment. Yeah.
You seem to have something to say about that.
No, yeah, I mean, sort of in a way, for me, there was kind of extreme fluidity moving from one discipline to another
Yeah.
discipline. And it was interesting because one learned and imbibed a lot, particularly at Baroda.
Okay.
For me, my sort of major leaders, in that sense, were the faculty there, which was extremely diverse, which were given to constant kind of discourses on tradition and modernity. And then, each one was, had a different kind of trajectory. So you had KG Subramaniam, Manisha, who kind of bridged the gap between craft art, design, and even performative art. You had someone like Sheikh Bhai, who apart from the historicity, sort of could give you a very clear picture in terms of the socio-cultural context and the evolution of different kind of aesthetics at the civilizational level.
Yes.
Then you had someone like Jyoti Bhatt, who was extremely dexterous and demanding when it came to techniques and processes.
Okay.
And then, of course, you had the kind of, minimalism, which came from Nasreen Mohammadi and Jairam Bhai.
Yeah.
And, I mean, there were a whole lot of them in that sense. And then, of course, Chatpar, Sir, Kaneria, Sir, Vinod Rai. In terms of the teaching methodology and pedagogy, I mean, their vision was kind of very, very different from each other. And so each one kind of subjected you from kind of different angles. So the learning experience was immense. And I think I was given to a lot of curiosity and working with people, interacting with them, too many questions. And I still remember Manisha's favorite story used to be, if you ask a millipede, which leg it moves forward, he would probably forget what to do. So don't ask questions, just do it. So it was a very kind of, inspiring environment to work in. And then even working with the sort of seniors was great fun.
Yes.
So my experience with materials also kind of, started there.
Yes.
So I was ready to kind of, rub anyone's sculptures, clean it up. So that was fun.
In line to like in relation to this, like how does pedagogy or institution kind of uh, take a part in your practice? How do you like, did it support it, or have you kind of totally gone beyond the kind of institutional pedagogy or the art education that you had received while you were students? So, is there any connection with it, or?
I think there's a lot of connection, but you also, when you leave college, you also have to unlearn things. And sometimes your work requires you to imbibe new skills that are required of you for what you need to do. And that aspect of what you need to do is also based in your socio-political, cultural, emotional experiences. So the training that you receive in a college is formative, just the way your upbringing, childhood upbringing is formative. But at the same time, as an artist, you also move beyond, you need to move beyond to be topical of your time in that sense. And all the important works that you see of in history, you see that artists or image makers, they try and address their times and a time to come in a way. How do they do that then is somewhere a kind of a balance between what they have learned and what they can jump towards in a way. So institutional structures have a huge role to play, even to promote the idea of openness and movement than static shaping of minds, you know. What Archana is saying is essentially this, that diverse set of people coming together and really bringing their perspectives, it's not it's multiple perspectives, not a singular, and shaping an individual in a way that they can branch out and do other things, you know.
Teacher, you learn while teaching, because it's also a process of learning, and then also beside teaching the other
Yeah,
person.
yeah,
It's a kind of constant, continuously growing in both terms.
yeah.
The student is also growing as well as the teacher.
Yeah, yeah. I think like, you know, there have been challenges to the question that do you need to be an artist to be a teacher? Being a good teacher and being a good artist are two different things actually. And it's just phenomenal that Baroda at one time had good artists and good teachers. You know, it doesn't happen in every institution, and it doesn't happen in every epoch in that sense, you know. So it was a rare time in that sense, you know. And it's something that has shaped contemporary art scene in the last 50 years in this country, you know. So I think that's very like, it's generative then as an institution, that they were good artists and good teachers, you know.
And that also shows because the moment we're having this conversation, one is realizing, especially from the three of you, because at various points there has been a Baroda connection and with her entire practice. This idea of learning by doing, it's constantly kind of coming across, which is something that is kind of slowly, I feel, moving out of our institutional structures, where the whole precedence given to thinking is so much that somewhere the making and doing is kind of taking a backseat or suffering at some particular point of time.
Like, sorry to.
No.
So
You're the curator.
Even the art fairs had taken a very important role in terms of making and learning also. No? Various, and
Yes.
because various people can explore
Because
diverse
art
material.
fair in the art world is different
No,
from,
in Baroda.
Yeah.
Baroda and Shantiniketan.
Yeah.
The
So you need to
college.
say it, yeah.
Sorry.
What was it?
Yeah. The hegemonic
art fair-
form is
Not art fair. It's Shantiniketan.
Nandan Mela.
Nandan Mela and
Nandan Mela and Faculty of Fine Arts.
Fine Arts
Art
Mela,
Fair.
yeah.
So they also played a major role, because even when I was studying, I didn't get the art fair in Baroda, but I had the opportunity to be part of Nandan Mela in Shantiniketan. So in Shantiniketan, you get the opportunity to do installation, public sculptures, which you don't get in a regular curriculum. So
Yes.
that kind of a student is getting exposed to different materials or handling of different materials. So in that sense, there is a kind of and different kind of, I think, institutional practice that also gets.
Learning outside the classroom in that regard is so much more important because both of these spaces have always facilitated that, right?
Yeah.
Because of all of these activities, you landed up doing so much that was not part of the structure, the curriculum, and so many other things. Like you could just, like, for instance, my time at Baroda, it was so much fun because you could just, be done with an art history class, walk into the painting studios, sculpture studios, and like see a lot of these things, a lot of the ideas, a lot of that.
I just want to bring the focus back to the art fair we had in the college, because all the teachers were also making things, and that became a very good learning curve to say that it's not all serious object making or painting, but there is a playfulness which actually sometimes gave a sense of direction to many artists to imbibe as into their practice. And I think Mrinalini Mukherjee's practice did come from certain activities which she started during the art fair, and how it has grown in her. So I think these these other activities become very, very important, and they kind of feed into the 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 trying to find your own path in the.
They were there in your time, like the actual.
Yeah, but actually, Mrinalini, I learned my early pre-room techniques from Mrinalini.
Okay.
So there was always the kind of, Manisha kind of didn't want the artisanal to be part of the whole thing. So it was good. It was sort of a lot of exchanging, mutual learning, and doing things together.
Kushala, do you have any such like experience
Oh,
of
what was Chicago like?
I think one, being able to learn from peers, and we always collided different, like we always met in the cafeteria, and someone's doing animation, someone's doing printmaking, and we would always go to each other's like studios. Someone's doing paper making, and see in the middle of the night at 12 o'clock. But way before that, I went to Valley School in Bangalore, which has a very predominant art center. And there also it was very open air. There was dance happening, music happening, tabla happening, carpentry, and it was given so much importance. We didn't know about the art that is shown in museums. We didn't know about which artists there were, but something that was really important was imbibed was we all sang together. We all choreographed a dance together, even though like we aren't all dancers. We all like painted together and did rangoli and did like torans and stuff, which I think is really like what I take from my practice is like how do you one make with your hands collectively with other people also. How do you and really like start to understand material. That's I think in my institutional like learning is it's been mostly how do you start relating to one another and the practices that other people do. Like for instance, my animator friends, they are always in front of their screen and they can just sit there for hours and hours for weeks on end, and I'm just like how do you do it? And for me it's like they would always like try to pull me out of the ceramics studio, and I'd be like, just 5 minutes, I'm cleaning up. 5 minutes would never be 5 minutes, it would be 2 hours. Because you don't know where the time goes when you're because you have to like clean up a specific way, you have to cover the clay in a specific way. So yeah, I think that connectivity with other people that are doing other facets of art is really important.
Yeah. No, once again, that's what you said and what you said about professional practice, especially when professional artists, when you have artists and teachers who are kind of, fused into one, it makes a world of a difference because that's also something one is slowly realizing it's not really present at a lot of places, at a lot of institutions. And it's not just to do with fine arts, it's also to do with a lot of other design disciplines, architecture disciplines, where that is kind of moving. You want to go ahead with that?
So, would really like to know about the kind of the material engagement or the process of your work. How do you kind of uh, like begin or kind of start on a work or in a studio, or what kind of things that you kind of goes into before you start a work, or
Yeah, it's for me, it's very fascinating to see artists at work, where because at Baroda you get to just walk into the studio and like people are just at it, and it's for me, it's as somebody who can't even draw a straight line or like put anything in place. It's very fascinating to see people come up with work and like like it's suddenly in a couple of days there's something entirely different. How does that happen? How do you do that?
I think I'll start with this really important caveat that let's not fetishize artistic work because it's a language. So you can learn to draw straight the moment you go sit with it every day. And it's a language, it's not some genius that we were born with. So it is about showing up like every kind of language. You need to just show up every day. What is really difficult, and I'll also come back to the question of mind blocks. What is really difficult is to show up every day and confront yourself, because the everyday story that you're telling yourself, to me, in my mind, the story is I'm not doing enough, and I haven't achieved it, I don't know anything, and whatever the higher powers are, please help me achieve. Be good and let me achieve things for myself and others, and make this place a better place, in that sense. That prayer is an everyday prayer in a way that I don't know how to draw, please help me draw. I don't know how to do work. So one of the things about the process, and I've become in a very uncomfortable way comfortable with that, is that because I don't know how to do things and I keep doing something or the other, there are smaller elements that I'm doing and I don't know how it'll all fit in. So I'm doing something really small like this arc, and then it looks interesting and I don't know what will, and I'm like, I don't know what this is. So there is this discomfort with not knowing, but comfort in finding out something. And that's important, and that's how every day when you show up so it's, in that sense, there's no mysticism there. Or rather the fact that you can show up every day has something mystical about it.
No, absolutely. Like let me rephrase that question. Essentially, so when I'm sitting and designing an exhibition after the curatorial concept has kind of, by and large come to place, one of the key things that helps me really make more better, clear choices is of late watching films. And it really kind of eases out the entire process for me, because one is constantly kind of understanding the way frames are kind of put in place, scenes are kind of put in place, movement happens. So again, so this has become like a ritual for me that helps me kind of go ahead. Anything like that?
I disagree with, I think curating an exhibition is very, very different essentially when you show up in your studio with utter blankness and you are taking a walk into a void when you are starting a work. Curation is you are working with the elements essentially. So you are working with the given. Here sometimes you are starting with zero. And I think there's a big difference there. So essentially, I feel one is just starting with nothing, and you are making with nothing sometimes, and then you find your way through the day or days to come and figure out what might be yours. Sometimes you have a knowledge of certain kind of making, and yet that knowledge is not with you when you show up the next day. It doesn't hold up, and you have to rethink and start all over again. So uh, I'm not romanticizing, it's sheer rigor of, as Rakhi said, showing up every day, whether you have a good day or a bad day. And I think it's very, how do you make something out of nothing? And I think that is a very important connection we have with one's own self, which answers that question in some small way. And then the journey is long and wide and big. So
Okay, but in that case, even like a lot of curatorial work also, especially when one is dealing with like certain dense ideas, it's very similar to that. Of course,
at
there
the
are certain
time of writing, perhaps, but when you have the elements in front of
but
you, it's not.
yeah, but at the time of writing, that writing also becomes a very critical part of the curatorial process, because that does eventually open up certain doors which otherwise would not be possible.
And apart from getting block, like artist block or writer's block, whatever, do you feel that at some point, like even I feel while writing for certain things, that certain things are getting repeated?
Yes, of
things where I am
course.
getting stuck into certain
Yeah,
things.
I
I
think
cannot.
there are comfort zones one
Yeah.
gets into very easily, and I think skill sets are something which become yours at times. I'm not saying, I think everyone has that, and then you start to be comfortable with that. But again, as Rakhi said, the whole act of showing up every day is also questioning yourself every day too. And I think that's what keeps you going. There are moments I feel I am repeating myself, and sometimes that repetition is also a point of learning about one's own practice, maybe. But it's a constant dialogue or a conversation with oneself, I feel. And especially the kind of studio practice maybe Rakhi and I and Archana are engaged into, it's one is alone in the studio, right? It's not with maybe some help and assistance. I think that becomes a different kind of relationship. But it's also complete engagement with yourself and your hands. That's the tools you have, and then you have to go forward with it. And I think it's a contemplative, meditative spaces we want to get into. I'm again not romanticizing the practice. I think it's a dogged day to day.
No, no, for sure. That because that
Day-to-day
editing
steps.
process and that process of self-reflection is also something that, as maybe writers, one
Yeah.
kind of goes
Like,
through.
yeah. And like certain things kind of bring certain ideas. Like reading something totally different
Yeah.
brings some idea which sparks some idea, some dialogue inside.
To connect, I think to connect the artist to the writer, when I have moments of, and I think there's similar things, it's like deep agony, because you're waiting, you want to, you're just like you're waiting, you don't know if you have it in you to draw the thing that you could draw 2 days ago, because you not haven't
Yeah.
practiced it, or you don't, sometimes you're just trying to make the basic thing and it doesn't come out, and you're just like, Arey, I don't know anything. But to connect the artist to the writer, there's one phrase that I go to with Hemingway in his book he's written, in The Movable Feast. He is sitting at the fire and peeling an orange into the fire, and he's writing about this moment, and he's like, I just have to come up with that one thing that is so true and go from there for the whole book. So like when I'm there, I don't know what to do. I think about that phrase that I'm like, I'm Hemingway. I'm sitting at the fire, being like, what is this one thing that is so true in this moment? And it could be anything. It could be like a very benign, very basic thing. And it could also be something that is not justified. And that's where you go from. That's where you go from, because it is true, and that's what you, if you depict something that is true, if you start working with something true, the outcome will be true.
I think it's also partly contextual.
Yeah.
In what state of mind or what sort of factors really affect you. Like when I went, my drawings were considered very sensuous. For a middle class person, there is, you don't draw the threshold between sensuousness and sexuality.
Yeah.
So it was very, very disturbing.
Yeah.
And so then from moving from there, one sort of, drawing again was something very personal, one constantly kind of discovering and rediscovering. And this whole thing of, there was life study on one hand, which was a very realistic kind of representation. You were fine, but it didn't engage you. And I remember because my, sort of images were very, very organic. So I remember, one of my teachers sending me to the laboratory, to kind of look at chunks of flesh and, react to but it just didn't work. But then I had an accident in which, it was temporary amnesia. And suddenly one kind of, one was drawing, one was painting out of behavior. The behavior, and then you did it every day, so you continue to do it. But at the same time, you're, sort of looking at things. It is there and yet you want to feel it. Yes, So it changes the entire temperament of your work. So that way, like sort of, I think one's work constantly changes. When I went to RCA, I mean, I had gone to that state that I knew all my colleagues, I mean, all my painter friends, there were 7 to 8 of us. But you knew them by name, you knew them by face, but you didn't really know them. And then you went through this very kind of strong identity crisis, and it got back a whole lot of nostalgia. And then suddenly your images again sort of change, So these are kind of phases, and then when you come back to India, and then you sort of, you are not in touch with the artists. And then you got involved in engaging textiles. And then you come to textiles, you revived sort of, Kalamkari unit. And I mean, prior to that, I also worked at NIT. And there, most of the template in these design schools actually are kind of transported,
Yes.
and they're not necessarily oriented in the context.
Yes.
So that too one kind of constantly questioned. And you see, I sort of did a lot of research in terms of what is the sort of socio-cultural context in which things actually, vernacular language evolves. And you see, my father was also in railways, so I came as about 20 schools before I reached college. And we moved from state to state, and my father was given to going to museums. My mother actually was interested in kind of all kind of artisanal activities. So one, in a way, grew up with that. And then coming back and left, it was again, it was a ready-made template, which was kind of taken from FIT New York.
Yes.
And so it was a ready-made croquis, which you dress up, ready-made body, which you kind of, again, three-dimensional dressing up to. But there was no kind of nuanced understanding of various kind of materials.
Yeah.
So that was something which sort of was kind of excited me, and which became part of my pedagogy there. And obviously, when you kind of engage yourself in a pedagogy, it kind of also informs you. So in many ways, my work also evolved, and then from there one moved to the performative era, and then from there, to the working with NSD and later on with films. There was an entire new dimension of creativity which enters your work. So that kind of fluidity I've been sort of, extremely sort of thankful because it informed my work.
It is to format me like what I'm thinking about art's role to the society and how do you like there is in two ways like there is one which is the socio-political consciousness that the artist has and it kind of may be an underlying thing to her or it may not be. And another thing is that what is the role of an artist or an art in the society in the contemporary situation, but because we are going through a very important phase, a very important time where there are so many things that are happening. And there's, in terms of art, also so many things that is happening globally. So, in that sense, we are doing think that.
Yeah, because it's also, I was just recently doing something on neuroscience, like reading up a lot on neuroscience. I forgot the name of the author. He said a very interesting thing. Artists, they work in isolation, but they're the first warning indicators of society, especially when it comes to understanding the socio-political undercurrents. So how does that, how do you then position yourself and the larger role then?
I'll say one thing, which is quoting James Baldwin. He says an artist role or with society is that of a lover. Like an artist looks at society as because they love it. It's like an artist should never take anything for granted and does not take anything for granted. You see things as is. And because you're so used to practicing that in your own work, you're used to seeing the color for as is without naming the color, you're used to seeing the relationship between compositions, you start seeing things in society also in a very nuanced, in a very subtle, in a very sensitive way, because the material prepares you to do so. So you start seeing things for as they are, rather than within all of the layers that are shown and facets that are shown. You start seeing love for love, you start seeing anger for anger, you start seeing rage for rage. And that's very easy then to work with, because you just start seeing how people treat each other very plainly. You don't have to put any ribbon on it. And I think that makes it easy, not easier, but it makes it harder for the artist to digest, at least not the artist, I would say for me to digest it. But then it's easier to see things for me. Yeah.
I think every society has different kinds of artists, and not all artists can foresee things, and there's all kinds of, and especially in our times, there's all kinds of artists, and I think it's a modern way to frame an artist, that the artist foresees and predicts the future for the coming times. But I think if we don't go by that definition of artist and see a larger network of practices, and in that, people are going through different kinds of mind blocks because the social context is of a particular kind, mind block is not something that happens in a vacuum. So I think like some things are pivotal in the question of how to understand your own situation vis-a-vis a social situation. Where do you find yourself, and are there ways to address that situation, social situation, in which you and many people like you are finding themselves blocked, So it's not like mind block happens only to artists and writers or creative people. Actually, human thinking is of a kind that only produces and loves to be in comfort zones, but that comfort zone is not what produces human thinking, in a way. So you also need to step away and get out, like the Fibonacci. So the point is that how do you make yourself available to this process of to and fro, some of the most interesting and simple activities are most beneficial to all, not just artists, like walking. Walking gives you this immense capacity to think clearly, right? Like you have a mind block, just go take a walk, you know? And you see yourself vis-a-vis the world, like the world is moving past you, and that gives you certain clarity of purpose, certain understanding of image versus form versus social space, all of that. So I think like when you say that artists see the world, foresee the world, or that artists have something specific to give, what is the biggest difference between common people who, also take walks and figure out their blocks, is that artists figure that out and put it in certain form, put it in certain writing, put it in certain kind of experience of this churning, in that sense, be it writer or any of it, right? You have to then circulate and go back on the thing and see what happened, in a way, and can you write about it or speak about it or open it up for somebody else's inquiry again, It's like an experiment. You have to go back on it, and reproduce it in a way. So I think sometimes the most basic of images become timeless in a way, something that is more fragmentary and ephemeral can lend to a timelessness in that sense. But also, in a way, I feel that artists, and I see myself constantly in that space, and this has been also discussed, that actually artists only see this much, and in that seeing, they don't really see big. I hand embroider, yeah, very myopic, and close-minded, and actually we all are like that. Even scientists are, We have this enormous capacity because of our hands, we can only do that much, but our eyes are things that see beyond, So we are based in this kind of experientiality in a way. And you know that in the history of art, like modern artists and their myopic vision only led to art for art's sake in that sense, So we also know that we need to go out and bring the world back into ourselves and then separate that and yet see ourselves as part of something else, So it's a process which is in a way circular inside itself and yet outside, like a conch, a big conch, in a way. So it's kind of like it's not easy to be in these times with like the kind of explosion of information, and then to kind of make way, create certain focus for yourself, make way constantly to, our time has been hijacked by institutions, and time is of most, it's become the most important resource in a way. Just 15 years ago, we thought that space is resource and it's most important, because material practices, we need a place, we need rentals, etc., But more than space now, time has become important because our mind is actually structured around fragments of time more than space, So it's kind of different epoch we are suddenly hurled into in a way, and we in a way making sense, trying to figure, you know, yeah.
I'm lost in the thoughts. I would say I don't think I understand much of what's happening in the world, and I don't know if I have the capacity to understand the complexities also. So I would not make any big claims about my work or art making that kind of a difference. I think what all of us are trying to do is make a journey day to day with the means we have, or with the means I have, to be able to make something. Now, what it results into, I do not know whether it's making any difference or not. I think sometimes it's no big deal what I'm doing. I'm not sort of taking myself that seriously. But it's just certain kind of pleasure one is getting in making. I have faith in that. And it's only that faith which takes you from one day to another. And otherwise, I think the questions out there are too big. And I don't think I have the capacity to understand. Maybe through making certain kind of visions come, but that's also not something which can sustain or make any big knowledge out of it. But so.
Could you elaborate on that, please?
On what?
Making may not sustain larger things coming out. Something.
I just said I'm not making any big claims. Okay. It's one is being able to make things with one's hands is a very big deal in terms of having faith in making.
Okay.
I'm just saying that. Okay. And I think that faith in making is enough to take you from one day to another. Okay. Beyond that, I would not be able to make any big claims, is what I'm trying to say. That I think is that daily practice, daily ritual of making or understanding or not making also sometimes. You're just sitting in void. And so I don't think I'm being able to make any big claims, or I don't know whether artists are taking on that big role or not. I think we'll have to wait and watch. The problems out there are very, very big.
Yeah. Over the time, I mean, sort of art has become a very distant, sort of, there is a gap between the viewer and the viewed and the maker. And this gap is something which has to be socially situated, and there has to be a certain amount of what I would say, sort of the aesthetic engagement, involvement, has to be at a collective level. And so that in the larger picture, it is sort of, it kind of revives. I mean, it is just a recourse, to sort of earlier times. It's just one of the strategies, that's all.
Sure.
But it does need to be addressed. And this kind of aesthetic component, the collective, sensorial, needs to be in a way revived, where the activity is shared, it is learned, it is sort of leads to a kind of better quality of management.
That's also one of the reasons why there's a rise of like collaborative ecological practices that one gets to see across the world, especially like coming out of Africa of late. So, yeah. That's also something that one encounters in design very, very, very frequently. Before we let you guys go, we have to know this. And this is something that we're borrowing from our social corporist. Any unrealized projects that you guys have in mind and you were just at some point of time gunning to look at that?
I want to make fountains. I don't know
Make
why.
fountains.
Yeah.
I think at some point I was involved with working with light.
Okay.
And its relationship with forms.
Okay.
And I think one of the things that is that helps me think about it, and I haven't really given it a lot of myself as yet. It's definitely then technological, but what really propels me to this area a little bit is the question of darkness, actually. And it's about resonance, and it's about certain kind of inspiration and affect that it produces, controlled in specific ways, or shadows, and all of that. So, I mean, there are artists who have been doing some very interesting work, but I'm yet to think through what would I work on, and as a material, what does it do? Like, what does it initiate in us as a response? Because also somewhere we are, we are animals, and we live on sunlight, and we haven't understood sunlight enough in a way, that it has huge spectrums which don't come to us, and all of that, and how we use spectrums of light that we don't see, So there's a lot of material scientifically and artistically that has already been done, but I want to do something maybe for another time, yeah.
I have been engaged with shadows in my work, and I would like to think in terms of movement next.
Okay.
And don't know how. And some engagement with sound too.
Okay.
And a larger space. So, I mean, maybe a spatial experience. So far, I'm slowly getting out of the wall. And slowly, I'm so slow at making these, taking these baby steps all the time. So, from the wall to a free space, maybe, and then from there to a movement, and with sound, because I am engaged with sound, I would say, and music. So, so who knows, all this may come together somehow, somewhere.
Forward.
I guess, I'm sort of making would always be there. For me, it is very, very therapeutic. And sort of my research continues, my documentation.
Yes.
But I'm publishing.
Yes, your larger work on Southeast Asian textiles. Sure.
Do you have any plans to like work kind of collaborative works with the Indians that you are like, researching on?
Yes, I did that in Cambodia. So, it's very interesting, because that was one way of kind of understanding, their culture. And, language was a problem, interaction with them was a problem. So just through making and doing and working together, there was a lot of kind of synergy.
Yeah.
And that is something which, I would really kind of explore. And I've been working with a lot of sort of design, craft, and sort of textile schools, where it is essentially kind of just, exploration, material exploration, so that they kind of imbibe it and.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for sitting through our questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.